Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to call the September 13th Traffic Commission meeting to order. Welcome, and we're getting into a more fast-paced era, but we hopefully have a relatively light agenda this evening, which is this afternoon, which is very nice.
Excuse me, Steve. Sorry, is your microphone on?
Oh.
I just wanted to make sure.
It is, but I was not speaking into it.
Thank you.
So good afternoon. Welcome to the September 13th Traffic Commission meeting. And it's hopefully a relatively short agenda, but maybe some lively discussion, who knows. I'm going to get started, as we usually do, by asking about the minutes from the previous meeting, the July 2022 meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? The motion passes. The minutes of the previous meeting have been passed. Our next item is to get into old business, quote unquote. This is an item that has been on and off, and we've talked about it briefly in the past. This is our opportunity for our city engineer, Cindy McCormick, and our consultants, Will Weismantel, sorry, to be able to make a presentation about the Lancaster Eastbound Connector project. Will?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Is everyone hear the mic okay?
Can't hear you. Maybe it's the same situation that I had. The button should be red.
Yeah, power button is on. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Will Weismantel with Kittleson and Associates. We were hired as consultant engineers to help with development of the eastbound connector. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the project development as well as the public engagement that we had with the project to date, and direction we're looking to go as we move into from preliminary design into final design of the project.
And I guess just for the commission's information, we would be looking for approval of the project then,
Perfect. That's fine.
after the presentation.
Unfortunately, could you slide to the next screen? I apologize. So basically, as I mentioned, this is what we'll go over briefly today. And getting into the next few slides, if we can go forward one more slide. This shows a bit of the project corridor. It's basically broken up into two sections here. One is, we did a conceptual study on the full extent shown on the map here, which includes Walnut Street from College to Race Avenue between Walnut and Buchanan. This section of Buchanan shown, as well as the bulk of Lemon Street, and then looked at conceptually connections on Fulton Street for future work. As far as what we're looking to take into final design is the sections here shown in blue, including Walnut Street, Race Avenue, Buchanan, and Lemon Street, and Fulton and Shippen Streets ending at the intersection with Walnut Street. You can go to the next slide, please. So basically, the visions and goals for the project are to create an eastbound bicycle connection through the city to mirror the existing westbound facility that is on Walnut Street, creating a complete east to west circuit through the city. As part of the goals, it's to create the low-speed environment that jives well with the city's Vision Zero initiative to create safe operating speeds for all users within the city and to decrease high injury and deaths. Also, as part of the goal coming out of Lancaster County's active transportation plan is to increase the number of people walking and biking within the community and the county as a whole, and as I mentioned, reduce crashes. We could go to the next slide, please. Touch base on it as well, but really the project stem from sections within the active transportation plan that was put together by the county and adopted by the county and the city, as well as meeting the objections of Lancaster's Vision Zero goal. Also, with the eastbound connector also becomes opportunities for future connections to the Lancaster suburbs and rural communities beyond through the planned Greater Lancaster Heritage Pathway that will connect to either end of it. Based off of data that the city collected based off of motor vehicle volumes and speeds that are on the existing corridor, the recommendation was to move ahead with a parking separated bike lane. This is a facility similar to what's on Walnut Street today. The main difference with this is, as we all know, Walnut Street is a one-way, two-lane road heading in the eastbound direction, while Lemon Street is a two-way facility. So because of that, as Walnut Street is currently laid out, the parking separated bike lane is on the left side. This would be more of a traditional bike lane where the bike lane will be located to the right of motor vehicle traffic. We could go to the next slide, please. This basically goes through some of the benefits of a parking separated bike lane, but selection of this facility type basically meets a lot of the goals stated within the project to increase cycling for all users and ability levels, introduces a higher level of comfort for those users, but also has been shown through studies to reduce mid-block crashes, and also with correct implementation can reduce crash severity. Some of the best practices that we will be trying to follow with the design of this is to create a 2 to 3 foot buffer between the bike lane and the parking lane. This essentially reduces what's known as dooring, where a biker who's riding along the facility will have less of a chance of being hit by a person getting out of their motor vehicle by the doorway. Also designing to a 5-foot minimum bike lane as our best practices. Similar to Walnut Street, we'll be looking to implement daylighting at the intersections. That's basically the painted area that designates the space that is where parking is not permitted in the location of the intersections, and provides better sight lines for motor vehicles, bicyclists, and also pedestrians at those high conflict points. Just to get into a little bit of the timeline of the project, where we've been and where we're hope to go with it. We initially started concept design on the corridor in early to mid 2021, and some of the preliminary work for this had started even prior to that, with selection of Lemon Street as the preferred corridor for the project, and really the conceptual design, as you see here today, started at that point. We had our first meeting in July of 2021, followed by 2 meetings running through 2021. We again picked up public engagement in June of this year, and that was really to focus on an extended scope area for the project in final design. Initially, kind of the loop on Walnut Street, Race Avenue, and Buchanan. We didn't look like that we were going to be able to go into final design of it at this point, and it would be for a later time period, but there is the capacity to move ahead with that portion of the project now. Basically our goal our hope today is for approval with the Traffic Commission and then move into final design through this fall and into the winter for construction starting hopefully in the spring of 2023 into the summer of 2023. And this basically summarizes the goals and what was accomplished at the 4 public meetings that were held. Again, kind of went through this already, but showing the extents that we're hoping to take into final design. Give a little bit of an overview of the toolbox that was available and for the types of treatments that we're trying to implement, and also what was presented to the public at the 4 public meetings. Many of these types of facilities are already present in the city of Lancaster, and some will be forthcoming and hopefully implemented in the future. So before we get into the plans, just wanted to show briefly some of the typical sections and the changes we're looking to make to the corridor. This is on Buchanan Avenue along the very western limits of it. This short block here does have the highest parking loss impact along the corridor. However, it's in a section that's generally low with parking utilization. And really, the only place on the corridor where we're proposing a 2-way bicycle facility, one on each side of the street. This is for basically setting up the facility for future connections to the Greater Lancaster Heritage Path that I had mentioned earlier. And, basically utilizing the current westbound parking lane for an additional bike lane for this stretch on the western limit of the city. As we go to the next slide, on Buchanan, this is where we have the existing bike lanes today that were designed several years ago. Best practices now are more towards 5-foot bike lanes than the 4 feet that are out there. Because of the additional westbound facility on Walnut Street, as we went through the public process on the project, the decision was made to eliminate the existing westbound bike lane and basically complete the circuit of parking separated bike lane with an eastbound bike lane, as you can see on the right screen. This is now basically the section that we'll see for the majority of the corridor. Keep in mind that the curb to curb width does vary pretty greatly throughout the corridor length. Older infrastructure and not necessarily parallel curb lines on either side of the street. So that's why you see some of the ranges that we mentioned on the right. For the most part, we are able to meet the wider widths at the minimums, but there are places where we do have to get down to minimum widths. Basically, for most of the corridor then, we're looking at an 8-foot wide parking lane, 10 feet travel lanes in each direction, 7.5 to 8-foot parking lane with a 2 to 3 foot buffer, and trying to maintain that consistent 5-foot bike lane as well as a consistent 10-foot travel lanes throughout the corridor. So that's where the variances are within the parking lane. Walnut Street, we went through during the public engagement process for 2 alternatives. One would basically switch the parking separated bike lane from the left side of the street as it is in the existing conditions to the right side of the street between College Ave and Race Avenue. The other would be basically an extension of the facility on the same side of the street that it is today. We went to a poll with it, and generally those at the meeting were in favor of keeping it in the extended section in the same orientation that it is today. So we'll be extending it on the left side of the street. And the last section is on Race Avenue, the short connection between Walnut Street and Buchanan Avenue. Looking for means to provide that connection and providing a parking separated bike lane here as well with lane reductions similar to other streets along the corridor. Do have, okay, yes. Some of the things we're continuing to evaluate and we'll look at further during final design is additional treatments at the intersections themselves. This kind of shows an example intersection along Walnut Street today and some of the additional improvements that we could do to further enhance safety for all users at the intersections. And I think with that, we can flip through some of the plans that we have for this section, if there's any details that we want to go through. But in general, the typical sections kind of showed the type of corridor that we're running through the bulk of the project limits.
And all of these were discussed and presented and discussed in detail at the different public meetings, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and with the public engagement process, the first meeting, we presented the concept, received a lot of feedback with it, and at each subsequent meeting, we used almost at points, question by question, comment by comment, provided responses to try to really address the concerns of everyone who was in attendance at the meeting and also who engaged with the city through the Engage platform. And this did lead to several iterative changes in the design during the process, generally staying with the same basic design, but changing, in some cases, parking lane widths and the alignment at a couple of intersections in order to address concerns that we heard.
Are there other things that you'd like to present or provide to the Traffic Commission at this time?
Not at this time.
Cindy, are there other things that you'd like to be able to say about the process or the input?
No, I think as Will had mentioned, we were very conscious about, providing responses to a lot of the concerns that were raised. So, we did have a very robust public engagement process with 4 public meetings related to this project. So I think that, people were.
I do think, if I may add, I do think it's noteworthy that during part of that process, the reassessment of the Walnut Street, the westbound connector, gave a certain amount of additional input, not only for the new design for the eastbound connector, but the city will be implementing some modest improvements based on that assessment of the pre-existing Walnut westbound connector as well. So I think in part that's responding to the fact that that the needs not are evolving, but our understanding of the needs may be evolving. And it showed that there were certain problematic intersections that could do with some modest improvements.
Agreed.
So are there questions or comments from the commission itself?
I'll put it out. No, sorry. Maybe. No, I'm loud enough. I'll put it out there. Public comment that we received from a police department standpoint on the protected bike lanes tends not to be favorable in most spots. And personally, from being out there, the sightline issues that they cause with the cars out is a definite issue with things. One of the other things I know from our standpoint, the police department, Cindy, you and I have talked about this, is really a lack of any type of state or city ordinance for parking away from the curb like that. There's nothing to actually allow for that at this point, which creates a potential large enforcement issue for us. Not to mention, technically the person that parks up against the curb right now in a protected bike lane is the legally parked car, which is obviously going to cause headaches. We're aware of anything sitting in a bike lane, even partially, how that's created. So that's where our concern comes in. And again, that's feedback on a regular basis from guys, and several near misses that we've had with that protected bike lane, especially on Walnut with the left-hand turns, where you can't see that bike in that bike lane when it's coming down. Whereas if it's on the outside, I can now see that bike and see where it's at, and they can see me a lot better.
Are you, are you familiar with some of the improvements that have been suggested for the Walnut Street corridor with increased daylighting and et cetera?
Yeah, I'm not sure of the exactly easiest way, but again, the protected bike lane itself seems to cause that type of, the sight line issue and the ability to see, and a free flow really of traffic, plus our enforcement end of it. I know on the DPW side, it's caused some issues on the maintenance side of stuff, and I don't know what all steps have been there. I don't want to know all steps. No offense, but street sweepers are not my forte. But those, there have been concerns with the protected bike lanes. Yeah. With them on the outside, again, you can see, I get the concept, but we have no enforcement mechanism for it. And it does cause, and water and Walnut is one of the prime intersection locations, because water is a heavy, sub-route, if you will, for a north-south route for a lot of people. And especially if there's any type of a truck or anything in those legal spaces for the businesses that are there at the corner, it is very difficult to see. You can see the bikes now because they're on the side, but I can't see the cars on the outside. That's where the problems come in for us.
Are there other are there other comments or questions from the commission?
Yes, I have a couple of clarifying questions. On Buchanan Ave, can you just clarify for me, is parking being eliminated on that north side for the entirety of the block? And I think that would be along Buchanan Park there?
It's to the west of Buchanan Park. At Buchanan Park, the parking will maintain. It's basically, could we go to the actual plan views, maybe? Up at the top, it's going to be hard for me
One
to
of the
tell which
tabs.
one's which. That's actually the correct one. If you,
The
actually,
second
it's
tab
not.
from the left?
Can you scroll through to the right? I apologize. Here we go. Yes, sorry. Can you zoom in, kind of in the middle of the sheet? Yes, great. And scroll to the right.
Almost there.
Yeah, so this is
There.
basically the section that we're looking at, directly to the west of Race Avenue. The residential dwellings in this area all have off-street parking with driveways, and generally, other than for certain events, parking on this block generally seems to be relatively low utilized compared to elsewhere on the corridor. Once we cross over Race Avenue to the east, we are proposing to maintain parking for the remainder of the westbound side.
Okay. Do you mind if we just scroll further east to see what that arrangement is between, I guess that's Race and College? Okay.
Yep, and President. Yep.
You want me to go any further?
I see. And this continues on the next couple of blocks, I
Yes.
suppose? Okay.
Yeah, and it's very similar to the configuration you would have even past College Avenue, basically trying to maintain a similar typical section. It does vary a little bit as the widths are, I think, a little bit different on Buchanan than they are on Lemon Street themselves, but
And Rhonda,
Less
could
than a
you
foot
go to
difference.
the end of the block there, just so I can see the remainder of that? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. And then one other comment. I had previously noted the connectivity between Walnut Street and Lemon Street by way of an additional connection by extending, I think, through Fulton Street to Lime. I know that one of our goals here is connecting the east and the west routes that we're building. On the north side, I think we've done that. On the west side, I think we've done that well with the Race Ave connection. On the east side, I'm just curious to hear your thinking a little bit more about how those two are interacting. I see Lime Street as a possible connection for people who are going west on the Fulton Street piece. They can continue to Lime Street, make a right, and hop on Walnut Street. But the alternative to that, I guess, is what I'm looking. I'd like for you to kind of illustrate for us.
Well, yeah, I'll start by saying that still is very conceptual with how the alignment will ultimately go. For what we're looking to take to final design right now, it is kind of determination of both the east and the west facility. It'll create a connection to complete the circuit at the intersection of Walnut and Shippen. But we have been working to identify several alternatives on the very eastern end, at the east end of Fulton. It does depend on some opportunities becoming available in the future as far as access would go with it. But unfortunately, without a map, it's hard for me to talk through the various alternatives there. But we have been going through conceptual alignments for them. And, as that portion of the project moves ahead, I'm sure it'll be run through the public engagement process.
Sure. Cindy, can you talk a bit about the phasing, how we are doing this in segments?
Right, we are, we have that final design, which we're, taking to the Walnut and Shippen intersection, basically, and looking at what, like Will said, looking at what some of the options are related to the connections. We think Fulton Street is a good choice as far as having the bike facility, and then what that looks like on both ends for connections is still to be determined. I think, the idea with the facilities that we're providing, I guess we're assuming that most of the bicycles would be going eastbound on Fulton. If they're traveling westbound, right, we're kind of assuming they're on Walnut Street. But if there are other, if we're thinking that maybe more people would be using Fulton in the westbound direction, we can also look at other connection opportunities there as well. And I know, we have talked about extending that block of Fulton between Shippen and Lime, just to look at it as to whether adding facilities there makes sense.
And remind me, what's the facility proposed on Fulton Street right now?
It would be a shared lane type facility.
Going east.
Right.
Okay, and then no facilities on the going west on Fulton. That would just be in traffic.
Right, and that's what east is as
Yep.
well. It's all
Yep.
it's all a shared lane.
Because I think that section of Fulton is two ways, right? We're just
Right.
choosing to emphasize the eastbound direction.
Right,
on
and
that. Okay. So if we're doing a shared lane and there aren't any traffic arrangements there, it sounds like there could be a situation where we have shared lanes going in both directions.
Okay, absolutely.
And then if that happened, then if you follow that east to the end of Fulton Street, you would not be able to turn right onto Shippen to connect to Walnut there. And I think even the next block of Fulton might be one way. It would have to, thered be maybe a
Excuse me, which
Sorry.
slide is that? So that it might be visible to everyone?
It's page 14, Rhonda. You wanna? Or slide.
Slide 14.
Yeah, I was using the wrong mouse.
Yeah, so if you scroll down a little bit, so Fulton Street is two-way for all traffic. It sounds like we currently are proposing a shared lane going east on Fulton Street, but not going west on Fulton Street.
Correct.
And I understand the Walnut Street lane is one option. I think, as an addition, potentially you could have a shared facility going west on Fulton Street and then extend it an additional block to Lime where people could make a right going with traffic, and then a left on Walnut. Whereas right now, if they can't make the right legally on Shippen to connect to the Walnut Street lane. They would have to, I guess, a block earlier on Plum, do that. So anyway, just a point of consideration.
Yep.
And then my last question is just around the connection on Race Ave. I was sort of intrigued by the need to create the loop. I think of these bike lines really as corridors where people, are hopping off at one of the exits, so to speak, along the way, and was curious about the importance of creating the Race Ave corridor connection there, and whether there were plans to extend that further south or north from there, and kind of what you see as the benefit of adding, some expensive infrastructure on just that short of a block.
Sure. I'll let Cindy talk about maybe future opportunities to extend the corridor, but the thought process behind creating a circuit is basically for, this bicycle facility being the arterial, so to speak, for bikes through the city. And, if someone in a neighborhood in the western part of the city wants to head to the east side, they would have the ability to use Walnut Street to head west and then north for a block before heading east, and basically providing that facility that's safe and comfortable for all ages and abilities, and creating that connection that may not exist otherwise if they have to ride on a non-designated facility to get to Lemon Street to head east.
Do you have a drawing that shows the gateway to the west? Because that's part of the connection that's being talked about.
Yes, and that's a great point, Steve. I don't believe we included it on the PowerPoint that's here, but as part of the connection for the Greater Heritage Lancaster Pathway, it would create that full connection then for people riding in to the city from the east side and wanting to go west of the city as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there other comments or questions from the commission? Are there comments and questions from the public? Please. And if you would, give your name and the block and the name and the number of block that you live on.
Serial number, the whole works. Some of you know me. My name is Bill Hoffman. I actually live in Manheim Township. I can give you the address there, but maybe that doesn't matter. Okay. I'm a member of ATAC, the Advisory Transportation Alternative. What was the name of it? Active Transportation Advisory Committee.
Yes.
I'm also on the State Bicycle Pedestrian Committee. Anyway, I am probably going to disagree with almost everything my friend Will has said today. And I just came from a meeting of PPAC, the quarterly meeting, and there was a question of what is going to happen with House Bill 140. That's the legislation that would enable these parking protected bike lanes, I call them hidden, but let's go with parking protected for now, to be built. In Philadelphia, they're doing a pilot program on some streets. Philadelphia is a different animal with the rest of the state, but currently that design is not legal. What you've been looking at here is not legal in Pennsylvania. I remember a meeting of this body, it had to be 5 years ago because Rick Gray was still mayor when the Chestnut Street bike lane was being discussed, a similar type of facility that we now have on Walnut. The former mayor, Art Morris, got up and he pointed out that the vehicle code says, and he cited book, chapter, and verse, all vehicles must be parked with the wheels, whichever side of the street they're on, within 1 foot of the curb. So right now, until that law is changed, that's not legal. And when the House Bill 140 was debated in April by the Senate Transportation Committee, where I testified against it, then there were some amendments added. So now, with the session ending, a new legislature will take effect in January. They'll have to, if they don't get something done before the session ends, they'll have to start all over again. And it's already been 5 years, and the law hasn't changed. Okay. Now, this type of lane upends over a century of road design, traffic law, and driving conventions. They countermand the long-established practice, and this is what I said to the Senate committee. They countermand the long-established practice of channelization, which serves to position traffic going in different directions so as not to conflict with each other. In other words, you don't place right-turning traffic to the left of straight-through traffic. Parking-protected bike lanes are not the panacea that the proponents claim. They fail at the most critical point, intersections, which the officer had alluded to earlier, which the intersection could be a driveway as well as a street or an alley. Any design with such a built-in defect should either be fixed or scrapped. And the only viable fix for something like this is at a signalized intersection, you put in a separate signal phase for the bike lane and one for the traffic lanes. Or if there's no signal there, you put in a stop sign. Guess who's going to get the stop sign? Okay. This obviously adds to the cost of building this facility, and it increases travel time for all the modes, not just the cyclists, with no corresponding increase in safety. These lanes create a feeling of safety in novice cyclists, but feeling safe is not the same as being safe. And you shouldn't be encouraging cycling by putting cyclists at risk. No bike facility in itself confers skills. It is education that confers skills, and I speak as someone who has had a national certification to teach cycling for 42 years. All these factors are in addition to the second-class treatment of cyclists by consigning bike lanes to the gutter. Gutters are not safe places to ride. Everyone needs to understand this indisputable fact. Anytime anyone travels on a public road by whatever conveyance, they are voluntarily assuming certain risks. The risks can never be reduced to zero, but with proper training and the proper attitudes, the risks can be reduced to a level that just about everyone is willing to accept. The only alternatives is to never leave your house. Now, a few details that I've noticed. I know the city is making some modifications to the Walnut Street lane. I don't know what those are, so I'm not going to go there. But the bike lane will cost, and I saw several slides about that, at least 1 or 2 parking spaces per block. Maybe more if there are driveways. On Walnut Street, like many other people, I saw cars parked in the striped area, not ticketed. Well, okay, the police can't be everywhere at all times, and there's still a learning curve going on here. I understand that. At Lancaster Avenue on Walnut, the parking clearance is about 1 car, which is not enough for crossing traffic to see approaching cyclists. On Walnut Street, the parking, when I measured it right after the lane went in, it was usually 20 feet, about 1 car length. This is not enough for either overtaking traffic or crossing traffic. A driver who slows to 15 miles an hour to make a turn is still traveling 22 feet per second. So that's more than 1 car length per second. And in that 1 second, they have to check for pedestrians that they have to yield to. They have to keep their eyes on what's in front of them. And then they have to turn their head about 180 degrees to see if anybody's approaching in the bike lane, which they can't see because the cars are parked there. Okay. On Lemon Street, the problems are compounded because Lemon is 2-way, so you have crossing and turning traffic in both directions, not just one. So I would take another look at this. I think there are other things you can do to improve cycling. I noticed what the treatment proposed for Buchanan Avenue. The current bike lanes that are there now do not meet standards. Even the lane widths do not meet standards because I measured them. And I sent a legal notice to the city about that this is a hazardous condition and needs to be remedied. And at an ATAG meeting a year or 2 ago, Cindy mentioned that when the road is repaved, the bike lanes would be removed. Now I'm seeing something different here. So maybe you've changed your mind, but I think that is the perfect candidate for SHAROs, shared lane markings, because the street is not wide enough for a regulation bike lane and a regulation by the city's standard car lane. Okay, I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you like to say anything to respond to a couple of the points that were made by the
Just
gentleman?
related to Buchanan Avenue, they aren't being replaced as they currently exist is what, so they would be replaced with this new section, with the parking protected bike lane, so.
And at the width that is legal.
That's just for a very small, the parking removed is only for it's basically for a half a block between Race and State Street, where there currently isn't any bike lanes. aren't any bike lanes, but.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I do want to reinforce also that the infrastructure that's proposed is trying to, as you had noted, is trying to implement the countywide active transportation plan. The principles thereof were adopted by not only the county, but also by the city. We do understand that in a third-class city situation, we have a different situation than Philadelphia. What has happened so far is in some of these cases, we're allowed to be doing it for all intents and purposes not as an experiment, but as a way of confirming how it would work, which is the way we're using the westbound connector right now by having reassessed and been able to make some changes. But I do hear what you're saying in terms of your concerns about safety, and which echoes some of the things that were said elsewhere. I do apologize if you couldn't come back up to the microphone.
Okay, well, all I said was, now I understand why. You probably are viewing this as a pilot project rather than as an experiment it's not really an experiment, you said.
We're hoping that it would be fully implemented. But up till now, we've been allowed to do these kinds of interventions as, if you will, as pilots.
Okay, and PennDOT approved those?
Well,
Lemon is a city
these are
street.
not these are city
They're
streets.
city streets.
Correct. So we have more leeway to make those kinds of efforts on city streets than we would on state streets.
Okay, but you have to conform to the highway design manual of PennDOT. And as far as I know, this type of facility has not been put into the manual yet.
Are you able to speak to that at all, Will?
As Bill is aware, the current highway design manual from PennDOT does not. There are modifications that are forthcoming, but they have not been published yet at this point.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there other comments from the public? Please.
Good afternoon, thank you. Bill Hannigan, 304 College Avenue.
Mhm.
So my property fronts on College, but the whole side is adjacent to Walnut Street. And I'm aware that there is a lane for bicycles coming out Walnut Street. This gentleman might have referred to it as the left side of the street. I would say it's the south side of the street, to be clear. And I came in the middle of this and not understanding whether the existing corridor for bikes as is on Walnut will continue, or if there's some change taking it to the north side or right side. And then I totally don't understand which side of the block the bike lanes will be on in the 8 and 900 block of West Walnut Street.
Will, are you able to speak to that?
I can,
Oh.
they're gonna continue on the south side of the street. They're gonna continue, the bike lane will continue on the south side of the street.
Okay, that's a big question in my mind. So, thank you.
Are there other questions or comments from the public?
Good afternoon. My name is Tiana Johnson. My main concern, which brings me down here, is the intersection on Charles Road and Walbank. My son goes to school at Hamilton, and every morning when I tell you, it's like he's tapped in it. He tapped into his independence, and right now he wants to walk to school by himself. He wants to come home by himself. And I'm like, okay. And we live right there. So if I come out to the driveway, I can literally see I could see every kid come off of Hamilton's like little roundabout before they get to the actual intersection. Now, it's not the crossing guard at all. It's the vest that people don't respect. And it's not your 16-year-old people that just got their license. These are adults that I don't know if they're not leaving their house on time. That's beyond me. But when I see my child, and this is what brings me here, because the one day, the car didn't even wait till my son got onto the sidewalk. They're already accelerating to go to where they have to go, and I get it, but as a parent, as a walker parent, I want my child to get to school safely just like any other child, whether they're on the bus, whether their parent takes them, however the case. And I see this for myself. Speeding, they're just beeping the horn just to get past. Once the crossing guard is this way, she's stopping the cars this way. Everybody's supposed to stop. Until she has her arms up, she can see the cars disrespecting her because they still going, but she is telling everybody to stop, telling kids, grown-ups to go to get to the school. But there's cars doing their own thing, almost hitting kids, almost hitting adults. So this what brought me down here, because I don't know if it's like a speed bump issue. I don't know if it's a light that could be put there. A stop sign's not doing it. I don't know if a cop can be there. When I spoke to Miss Bernice, which is the actual, she's an aide in there, I don't know what type, but she's at the front desk at Hamilton herself. When I spoke to her, she said, Miss Tiana, I'm gonna make sure that I do something about this. For 2 days, we had a cop sit down on the corner. It's not that corner that they need to sit on Charles Road. If they're going to sit, they need to sit right there on Wallbank so they're seen. Because I don't know if the lights need to be on or something, because there's no respect for the children to get to school safely. I don't feel safe for my son, and I see it for myself.
So if I may say, you may want to raise this again at a slightly later point in the meeting.
Because I came late. I probably missed it, sir.
No, not a problem. This is primarily related to the eastbound and westbound connector.
I am so sorry.
And
They just told me to come down here September 13th at 3:30, and I said I will not miss it because this is something that's really on my heart.
Very good. So I believe ordinarily there's an application process if you want to raise an issue that needs to be addressed. But we can listen to it at a later point in the meeting, if you don't mind.
That's not a problem.
Okay,
That-
thank you.
that We're just beginning the meeting, so
Oh, I'll
we didn't
wait.
miss anything. So-
Right.
Thank you.
Are there other comments or questions from the public? Will? Yes, please.
In response to what Bill stated, the current PennDOT guidance does not provide it, but I do want to say that the design that we're basing the design for both the existing Walnut Street facility and the proposed eastbound facility is based off of federal highway guidance and standards that comes out of Washington, D.C. So while state guidance does not currently have it, there is federal guidance for the design and implementation of parking separated bike lanes.
And then are these considered best management practices or commonly accepted practices in terms of on the national level, and there are exceptions at the state level?
They are continuing to evolve and become more widespread and adapted throughout the state and throughout the region as well. And yes, we're following the best practices that are implemented through the FHWA guide.
Thank you very much. Are there other comments from the public, comments or questions from the public? Is there more discussion here at the council level, at the commission level?
Mr. Campbell, I just want to clarify, we're looking for a recommendation for approval of this concept, right? Which I'm certainly in support of. I think my one request is that we continue to look at the connection between the eastbound and westbound. The more I look at this, I'm realizing there are many points of connection between the two, potentially. It doesn't just have to happen on the east side of the city, though I do think, the Fulton Street or Plum Street would be helpful. We've been successful at doing that on the west side of the city. I would just encourage us to continue to think about what those connections are on the east side of the city between the two facilities. So with that, I would like to make a motion unless there's more discussion. And
I think I just wanted to make a clarification that the part that we're looking for approval for, or that is being looked for approval for, is the part that's within the black dotted line.
Understood.
The
Okay.
part outside of that, which I think is most of what you're referring to, are items that are still under discussion.
Sure, and I think that my comments could be addressed in the next recommendation potentially. So I'm all right with that. So I'll make a motion to approve the eastbound connector design as presented to the Traffic Commission.
A second?
There's a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? If there's not further discussion, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed?
Opposed.
Did you want to describe a little bit further about your opposition? I know you had made comment as well, Sergeant.
I still have his concerns too with enforcement, et cetera, that we need to change, we need to update the ordinances about that if we're going to have them do enforcement. You know,
Okay.
and that's coupled with other things, but the important one is about the parking, because it is curbside.
So we have 2 opposed, 4. Is that correct, Rhonda?
Yes, that's what I have right now. If you and Cindy are both saying, you agree with that, I have Douglas Smith and Dean March as a, well, motion.
Okay. So the nature of this is a situation that I haven't been in front of yet.
The majority, is saying they approve it, and it's documented on record that to oppose it.
And with the reasons for their opposition, with the reasons for their opposition, which may actually be able to be addressed in some way as we move forward, because this is the approval of the design, not the, which of course is the integral part to get us to the implementation. But I think since, at least in my opinion, we do like to take everyone's concerns very, very seriously, I do want us to be able to pursue, to the extent practical, addressing those concerns. So it sounds like this is has been approved. It's a simple majority that is necessary?
If the majority,
It has been approved with the opposition noted very significantly.
I'm sorry, the opposition is significant.
That the notations, the issues raised by the opposition have been noted ideally so that we may be able to address them over the course of the next phases of the work. Okay. Thank you very, very much for that then. The next item on the agenda is item 28, 2022. Consider the request of Cecilia Parker to change East Mifflin Street to one-way between Ann and Marshall, traveling westbound. Is Ms. Parker available? Did you want to speak to the work that's been done? Oh, is this Ms. Parker? Oh, okay.
I was going to say, she did not show up. There was a traffic study already completed, and she just asked that I give her an update.
Okay.
So the traffic study does the update.
Did you want to give a brief summary of the traffic study, Cindy?
Yes, we conducted a traffic study on the section of Mifflin Street between Ann and Marshall, because the request was to make it basically one-way westbound. So we collected volume and speed. It's a pretty even distribution of traffic. There was 46% of the traffic was traveling eastbound and 54 was westbound. There was probably at the highest hours, there were 12 vehicles per hour. There are, trucks that use this street because of the facilities that are located along it. But, given that the traffic was pretty evenly distributed, and there are opportunities for vehicles to pull off to the side, we were not recommending converting this to one-way. We also did review crashes. There was one crash at Mifflin and Marshall, but no crashes at Mifflin and Ann.
Are there any comments or questions about the study, the results of the study? The request was to be able to do the study, and so that has been performed with recommendations to not make any changes.
I would also note that we did, I think one of the concerns was vehicles hitting the applicant's porch. So we have worked with her to allow her to install some bollards adjacent to the house to try and keep vehicles away from the very edge of the house as well.
Is that the corner property there at Ann Street?
Yes, it's on the south side.
That was,
of Mifflin.
if we were the direction going westbound, Ann Street is not your wide street where you can move trucks or tractor trailers without taking up both lanes when they're making a turn. Yeah, that was another thing. So I'm in agreement with the study of leaving that alone, because Marshall has a little bit more, you're given a little bit more option with Marshall, to facilitate the movements. Because I know Ann Street's always been a difficult street, particularly with parking. So I'll agree with the study.
Now, in this case, I don't think we need to make a motion. We're just acknowledging the study and its recommendations.
Right, I'll make a motion to approve the study.
Are we making?
No, I think we'd make a motion.
So-
Yeah,
I'll make
because she's
a
asking you
motion
to consider a
deny.
request.
Yeah.
Right.
So I
Deny
think-
the
I think
request.
I'm gonna, I'm gonna make the motion that we deny 28-22 based on the traffic study presented by the city.
That's how we've done it in the past.
So there's a motion
I'll second.
and a second. Is there further discussion? Is there any discussion from the public? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item is, we now go over to the action agenda, where the first item, 35-2022, is consider the request of Jen Godfrey to review the intersection of Hamilton and Marshall Streets for safety and maybe consider a four-way stop. Is Mr. Godfrey here? He is concerned with the speeding and accidents in the area that is not safe for the neighborhood, also suggested tree removal. Cindy, is there a summary?
I haven't looked at this. Yeah. This is a new request, so I'm not sure.
Okay. So this is the intersection in question?
Hamilton and Marshall.
It is difficult when something is fully marked. There are stop signs in two directions, but not all, it's not a four-way stop at present. Rhonda, has there been any further comment or outreach from Mr. Godfrey?
Just the letter that came through. It actually went through city. It didn't come to me directly. I sent notice to Ms. Godfrey that this was coming to traffic commission, and I don't believe anything was returned to confirm.
Okay, do we wish to table it?
I think, Stephen, we could probably close that item out. I can have some of our people talk to her and look at that intersection. I don't know if there's anything that the traffic commission necessarily would change, but we can go out and take care of that action item.
Well, that sounds very good. I
Everything
appreciate
sounds
that.
administrative. The exception of one thing about suggesting the tree removal in all my years on traffic commission, I don't think we've ever actually made any kind of recommendation to ever have landscaping or a tree taken down. I know from time to time we get really big trees that do conflict, but we typically make changes like restrict parking up against the tree to help the sight lines or something like that, but I don't
Right.
think we've ever done anything with removing a tree.
And I think even with the recommendation for removal, it would need to go before Shade Tree Commission.
And we can
Yeah, I don't
address
think
that.
I don't think this board should ever get involved with looking
Right.
at taking
If we find
trees.
an issue with the tree, we can address that with the city's arborist and pick them out,
Very good.
just like we would any other obstacle.
Very good. So if that's the action that we'll take, Rhonda, you'll be able to get back to him or her to let her know what we're about to do, and Sergeant Drace will go out and reach out. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So then the next item on the action agenda is item 3622, 2022. Consider the request of Doreen Landis to address Traffic Commission regarding the need for a traffic control device at Duke and Ross. Is Ms. Landis present? She'd like to discuss issues related to speed and safety on South Duke Street. So if you'd give us your name already and the 100 block in which you live.
Yes, I'm Doreen Landis, and I live in the 800 block of North Duke Street between Clay and Ross.
I'm sorry, could you just speak up a little?
Yes, sorry. I'm Doreen Landis, and I live on the 800 block of Duke Street between Clay and Ross Streets. And the reason that I'm here is because there have been many accidents on the corner, or the intersection of North Duke and Ross Streets. On June 30th, there were actually 2 car crashes where 2 cars hit each other in that intersection on June 30th. And as far as I know, there was many accidents before that I've witnessed and what I've been told as well. So cars really speed down Duke Street, and I don't think if people pull out, it's almost like they're just taking their life into their own hands because they have to pull out without, and if a car is actually parked close to that curb illegally on Duke Street, then it's even harder to see. So, and if cars would be going the legal speed limit, they would have a little more time to stop. So I just thought maybe some sort of traffic signal device would work well there.
Is there anything more that you'd like to share with us about this? Or is there anyone else with you who'd like to speak as well?
I think that's it. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I'm Christina Leslie. I live on the 800 block of North Duke. I've been in that house since 2008. And again, I don't have any formal studies of how many accidents there have been at that intersection of North Duke and East Ross, but I do know the last time there was an accident, and the police officer, because the intersection was blocked, but we had to get home, and he let us through. And I think he even indicated that they've been there so many times that there may be some concern and maybe even additional information that's been documented about that intersection. So, yeah, I agree. I think, we'll sit on our porch sometimes and people are coming, I would guess 50 or 60 miles an hour because they pick up speed when they're coming, down back into the city, and there's nothing there that's stopping that at that point. So it just is dangerous, and it is a crosswalk for kids walking to school that way. So just as a concerned neighbor, we wanted to bring it to the Traffic Commission's attention to maybe just take a look, whether it's a signal or a 4-way stop, because it does seem to be a trend of accidents there.
Thank you very much. Are people on the commission familiar with this intersection?
Yes, we're familiar with this intersection.
Yeah, this is,
Oh, I'm sorry, there's another party who'd like to speak.
I just want to mention, this has popped up since I've been on the Traffic Commission since 1991. This has popped up several times. Duke and Ross has been a thing that comes back to us numerous times.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Noreen Rainier, and I live on the west side of the town now, but between 83 and 95, I lived in the 100 block of East Orange, Ross Street, just down that corner. And just before I moved in, that corner was designated the worst corner in the city. So this has been going on for at least the early 80s up to now. Just to give you an idea
Yeah,
of the
thank you.
length of the problem.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else would like to speak on this item, on this intersection? Please, sir.
Bill Hoffman again from Manheim Township. You don't stick a microphone in my face, you'll be sorry. No, I have direct experience with this intersection, both as a cyclist and as a motorist. And the sight lines crossing either way on Ross are very poor. And I don't know how far the parking setbacks go back, but that's about the only way I know of to improve the sight lines there, because it probably does not meet warrants for a signal, and the state will not allow a four-way stop probably on a state road like Duke Street in the city. The problem is, and maybe when the city gets allowed to use radar, it might solve the problem, but there's 4 blocks from Liberty to Frederick where there's no signals. And now with the new bridge over Littis Pike, they're hitting Duke Street on a straightaway, and they're already off to the races. They're coming from a 35-mile road into a much narrower 25-mile road, and many of them don't slow down. I see Mr. Mandros is agreeing with me. But anyway, other than moving the parking back, and you may lose 1 or 2 spaces on each side, I don't know what else you can do legally. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to, from the public, that wants to speak on this item? Do we have information on the council?
Yeah, so
Commission.
we're aware of the issues with this intersection. We've added, flashing lights to the stop signs to try and make that more clear for the side streets. We've added the piano key crosswalks to highlight pedestrian crossings. We have also, this intersection is in our Vision Zero plan as one of the top 10 crash locations. And right now, we are working with a consultant to prioritize these locations. So we're starting to develop concept plans and that kind of thing for intersection improvements. We've also applied for the automated red light enforcement grant to make improvements to this specific intersection. At this time, we had identified potentially curb bump outs to try and make sure that it is posted for no parking, approaching Ross Street on Duke, but we all know people sometimes park there, so putting some curb bump outs to actually enforce that. We're looking at actually doing some curb bump outs at Liberty Street so that we're trying to calm the traffic as it's coming down from the Duke Street Bridge. So, and then also looking at putting some speed feedback signs in that section as well, just to reinforce that make people aware of the speeds they're traveling, similar to what we did on Highland Avenue. So we do have some improvements in the works, and you should be hearing more about them as we're getting more funding. We're trying to make sure that we have the funding lined up as we progress these designs, but
So the fact that it is one of the high injury network intersections means that it's a higher priority than many of the other dangerous situations we've got. And as you described, there's a variety of opportunities and options that we can consider. My understanding is that the prioritization will be within the next several months, at which point we can have more clarity about what exact actions will be able to be taken at this intersection. So anything else that the commission wants to be able to say?
I'm sorry, clarify for me real quick. I heard Steve say high injury, but you were saying that we hear about high crashes. So it's high injury in addition to high crashes at this intersection too?
yeah, so it's on our high injury network. So those were streets that were identified as having crashes that are, severe or fatal.
Okay, because I know the two aren't always necessarily.
Right, exactly.
correlate.
Right. And that's what we're trying to prioritize, those locations that have those high injury and fatal crashes. We understand there's a lot of,
Hold on a second.
Duke and Ross is that they'll never qualify for traffic
For
signals.
traffic signals, right.
Ross doesn't have enough traffic, the volume to qualify for that. The one thing I did want to ask, do you think if we put LED devices on that for the stop signs?
on the stop signs.
Right, and also maybe doing LEDs on Duke Street. It's like notifying, you know, something like that is, slow down.
Slow down. That's what the speed feedback signs, I think that
You know, that
we would
can
hope
do
that,
something in that aspect. I mean, the obvious thing is probably what we discussed in the past too, and for the future, was converting Duke Street to two-way. That would eliminate that issue, you know, possibly, you know, really slow down traffic and eliminate some of that problems that exist now.
right?
So what we ordinarily do in a situation that's currently under study is to continue to be able to periodically report back on its progress. Especially, I believe, after the prioritization has taken place, we'll be able to have perhaps a presentation that describes what we've learned and what we're likely to be taking on. Is there any other action that people want to see with this item? Continue down the path.
Make some improvements, you know, either through LEDs or whatever we can do
Okay.
to try to see what will work for that. No matter what we've done in the past, there's always been issues that come up. Similar issues that have come up.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was making background noise.
Background noise.
Sorry.
So did anyone else want to make a comment about this intersection?
It's just a suggestion. I know I've got tickets myself. Not only does it'll track your speed, if you do go past a certain speed limit, I don't know how it works, but I know it's like that in Baltimore. They will issue a ticket. I don't know how that would work in the, you know.
It's not, we can't legally do that.
Okay, so
any
just a suggestion. I'm like, I don't know how it works, but
Yeah,
I'm telling you, it's with the kids. It's
The technology
they,
precedes our,
right now, Pennsylvania is
also
piloting automated speed enforcement in work zones, but it hasn't progressed past that yet. So
thank you
that
very
is
much.
something, hopefully in the future.
Okay, so we'll hear about this again in the future. The last item on our action agenda is item 37-2022. Consider the request of Rodney Shoemaker to change Concord Street to one-way from Orange onto King Street. Is Mr. Shoemaker here?
Excuse me, Steve. So her request said to discuss the need for a traffic light, so are we going to motion it and not deny it?
At this,
I'll make a motion to deny the traffic signal because it's happened in the past where it doesn't qualify for that due to the traffic council in Ross Street.
and the fact that it is under study.
And it's a state roadway,
I'll second.
Duke Street State
So
roadway.
it's been motioned and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Otherwise, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, Rhonda, for the keeping us in order. Mr. Shoemaker?
Good afternoon. Rodney Shoemaker could not be here this afternoon. My name is Dave Blitz. I'm here representing the Facilities Committee of Community Mennonite Church of Lancaster. We're located on the southwest corner of Orange and Concord. This issue first came up when one of our neighbors, Kent Mast, approached us about putting a mirror at this intersection because he was concerned that people come around from Orange Street too quickly into Concord, which is a very narrow alley. If you enter that alley too quickly and someone that's coming north on Concord Street, the person who is coming in from Orange has to back out into the traffic of Orange Street. That's particularly unsafe for delivery vehicles, service vehicles, and the Red Rose Transit handicap access buses which use that street. We took our concerns directly to the city engineer. I'm sorry we didn't realize we should have come here first. The city engineers reviewed our request to improve the safety at this intersection, and they have made their recommendation. We realize that it is inconvenient for people who want to come out directly to Orange from Concord, but that is an inconvenience which we are also willing to accept to improve the safety of this intersection. Thank you. Thank you to the city engineers for the time and resources they put into studying this safety issue.
Thank you very much. Cindy, would you like to give a recap on what the engineering office did?
Yes, so, yeah, based on this request, I just, rather than bringing it to the commission first, I thought we would just do the study so that wouldn't have to be presented twice. So, yeah, we looked at again, similar to what we did on Mifflin Street, looked at the traffic volumes. This one had a little bit more of, there were more people traveling southbound, about 62%, with 38% traveling northbound. The vehicles ranged anywhere from 10 vehicles to 18 vehicles per hour, depending on the peak hour. We also looked at sight distance at Orange Street, and noted that we would, there probably could be improvements there as far as parking removal. And we also noted that just given the block, there really weren't many opportunities for vehicles to pull over to let other vehicles pass, similar to what happens in a lot of our alleys or lower width streets. Is there are generally opportunities for people to pull over to let other people to pass. This being with the church on the west side, it's curved pretty much the length of the block, and then there's fencing and other things on the right side that sort of prohibit people being able to pull over. So we were recommending making the street one-way southbound, so that would be all the way from Queen Street to King Street. Then we're assuming that a lot of traffic would use Grant to sort of come out to Mulberry Street. So there was a recommendation to, I believe, remove a parking space on Mulberry Street to allow for better sight distance exiting that way.
A quick clarification, you said that you make it one way from Queen to King?
Yes,
From Orange to
Orange.
King.
Orange, yes, sorry.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify.
Yep. So, in doing this process, we consulted with police and fire about making this recommendation, and then we finalized this, and then we also reached out to the people that lived in the area. We hung out door flyers to encourage them to attend the meeting to express whether or not they were in support of the converting it to one-way or not. I believe we had forwarded to Rhonda. There were, I believe, 3 people that were unable to attend the meeting that sent their opinion. We had 2 that indicated that they thought it was fine the way it is. I believe those were people that lived on Grant Street. So obviously this would limit their ability to access Orange Street as quickly. Given that Grant is one-way eastbound, they would be, if they wanted to go north, they would have to go out to Mulberry to get, or north or west, I guess, is the issue. And then there was one that was in support, I believe. Was that correct, Rhonda? Were there just 3 that you received, or 2?
I actually have 2 emails. They're included in the background. One said they're registering dissent, and the other yes, the street is tight, therefore makes some two-way interaction challenging, with the ability to drive either direction towards the intersection. So the 2 emails that I have are both against.
Yeah, and I think there was one other one.
I'm sorry, Rhonda, could you repeat into the microphone what you said? Both of the comments were against turning it to one-way. They were in favor of keeping it two-way. You're welcome. Any further either recommendation or work to be done?
Well, I think that we just. No, you don't. Those were just for people, so that we're still, I'm finished with mine.
Okay. So, we have the report from the engineer. Is there any other comment on the commission before we open to the public comment? Hearing none, I mean, you can continue to put your thoughts together if you'd like. I can open it up for the public. Is anyone from the public wanting to speak on this item? Please.
If I have a couple, like
Your
drawings or
your
pictures.
name
correct?
and the block that you live in?
Sure. My name's Nick Sura. I live at 323 West King Street, which is the west corner of Concord and King Street. So at the very bottom of the picture on your referencing. I have a couple pictures and so on to reference. Do those get submitted somehow, or?
You can actually put them on the table, you'd have to switch them around, but there's not going to be a microphone over here.
That's fine.
But there is a camera that can,
Just lay it down.
if you turn them 90 degree, yes. It was clearer when you,
Yeah, it's autofocus.
Okay.
Placing.
don't touch.
So I live on the corner of Concord and King Street. Our house is a historic house in Lancaster. There we have some documents from the National Park Service and Registry of Historic Homes that it was the land on which it was built was established as a parcel in 1740, and that the house was likely built between 1780 and 1790. The original parcel of land was 220 acres, so it's very likely that it was built prior to a lot of these streets being established. There's currently a garage on that house, which you can see that opens up onto Concord. It's a little bit atypical of on-alley parking in that it is directly on the street, and was presumably grandfathered at some point before those code rules were in place that required a setback and so on. Because of the historic nature of the house and the fact that it's been there so long, the street has been resurfaced multiple times over the course of time, and has created essentially a 15-inch drop-off into the garage, which you can kind of see the measurements here and the reference. Concord's also a really narrow street, which does create occasional problems as far as vehicles traveling both directions. But in general, it's a very slow rate of speed as referenced in the traffic study, like 18 miles an hour on average. And so those occasional conflicts can usually be resolved. There wasn't any reference to accidents actually created by vehicles traveling opposite ways on this street, and I think that's important to note. The traffic study also doesn't really comment on the exit that would be created by this onto King Street, where there's essentially parking right up to Concord on both sides with no line of sight. They comment on Mulberry, and even the church's concern was more so the pulling out onto Concord. But the long story short is that if this is implemented, it basically limits our ability to park in our garage, because if we travel in the proposed direction, because of the narrowness of the street, we have to use the full width of the garage because of that narrowness. And even though it's a double garage, we have to pull forward and kind of turn in, and we would essentially be driving over this 15-inch drop-off instead of being able to come from King Street, where we can pull forward and drive over the lower portion. So it would basically limit our ability significantly to utilize our off-street parking, which we'd love to continue to do and have precedents for doing. Of note, the house previous to even having a garage there has an entrance to the basement and stairs which are now covered up, which would previously indicate that there was parking there probably, or stables of some kind for horse and carriage. So we kind of have a historical precedent for the ability to park there. We have some significant concerns about the ability to do so if this is designated as a one-way. I know the concern is, and most of the discussion is like north of Grant. So we're obviously south of Grant. The other issue that this creates for us, which is unique to our family, is, we have a couple young children. And so right now we have the ability to pull in off King, stop, put our kids inside and pull right into the garage and be in the house in, 1 to 2 minutes. If that is created, we don't have the ability to do that. We have to stop on King Street, put our kids in the house, drive from King to Mulberry, sit at the light at Mulberry, turn left onto Mulberry, drive 2 blocks, sit at the light on Orange, turn left, and then turn onto Concord, and then park in our garage to be able to access our parking. So we would be opposed to having this become a one-way street.
Do you have any other comments that you'd like to share?
I don't. I've provided some pictures for reference and also the historic document that references when our home was constructed.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Just so I understand the drop-off issue, is it, so further north on the garage is less of a drop-off, so that's what allows you to pull in versus if you were coming the other way? the
Correct.
drop-off-
If you're driving from south, if you're driving north on Concord, the drop-off is where you would end up, you can pull over the lower portion of the drop-off. If you're driving south on Concord, you have to drive over the higher portion and would essentially you could do it in an SUV, but the garage isn't big enough to fit an SUV, so we park our car there and it won't go over that.
Okay, thank you.
Others would like to speak?
My name's John Rainier. I own 322 West Orange Street. That's my wife Noreen. And we turn that picture around and we're on the other end of Concord Street, right at Orange. Right across from the church. And I know that property well, and congratulations on buying it. It's a real nice place. I know exactly what he's talking about. He's screwed if you do what you want, if you would go through with this plan. But my concern is, by the way, that one slide you had at the very beginning, you had the wrong picture of Concord Street. That's the Concord Street that's across the street. It dog legs there. And that was made one way a couple years ago, and people fuck traffic all the time there. So I just wanted to point that out because you're not showing that was the Concord Street that he had in his picture. That's King Street, King and Charlotte. By the way, I grew up here my whole life since 1955 in this area at 322 West Orange Street. I have a parking area behind my property. It's fairly nice size, and church has a pull off, and they have a really nice parking lot down below where they can actually pull in and go around. They could go east or west, whatever they want to do. So there is, I was surprised when you said that you kind of get stuck there. The Concord Street you just saw there, yeah, that one's tight and everything, but my end is a lot open. I'm a friendly neighbor. I swear right now in front of all you guys that I do whatever I can to make sure that there's no hassles. I don't cause any problems. If somebody's coming down, if my neighbors come, I see him coming out of his garage, I'll pull in my parking lot till he comes by. Then I go out. I'm an old man now. I don't want any trouble. I don't want to get, but I do what I can to facilitate things, anything I can do. If somebody's coming, I always check to make sure which way is traffic flowing. I see somebody coming in the alley, I always just stay put till they go by. There's really not that much traffic that goes through there. I have cameras. I could show you pictures. There were long periods of time where there's nothing. And it's a really nice little area. And as far as the logistics and everything, if you would change, you pick your poison. You could go out King Street there or Mulberry or Orange. You're going to run into the same situation every place. And Mulberry is probably the area that you want to send people out. Really, that's really not a good situation anymore since you made it two-way, because the school on Fulton, when Fulton lets out in the afternoon, they have an awful lot of parents come by and they park their cars up there and their buses pick the kids up. And that creates a traffic jam. It starts forming to go all the way. And then the traffic comes off of Mulberry Street where the old Van Skywers used to be. It's the Umbrella Works, I guess. And that comes down in there and it turns into a real traffic jam. So you're looking at just pointing people to changing everybody's way that lives around there. People like me are going to be inconvenienced. I'm going to have to start going out to Mulberry Street and waiting a lot of, it'll probably take a while to get out there, but it's even dangerous too, because a lot of these cars now are low cars. You can't see those guys when they're whipping down the street. And the other issue over there on Mulberry Street, and I was thinking about this when they were talking about the bike lanes too. If you ever take any kind of parking spots off away from Lancaster, that's just the wrong thing to do, because Mulberry Street's already lost a couple because of those rock gardens. And you lose another parking spot over there, that's just really going to hurt people, because people need places to park. And even in those little alleys there's people live there. That by right, by law, they're not allowed to park out on the main streets. So there is a real parking issue. Anytime you get rid of a parking spot, that's really a bad situation. So those are the, let me just look at my notes real quick. Those are some of my main concerns. Do you have anything else, Bree?
Could I just add that we're speaking for 3 properties, 322 West Orange where we live, and then we also own 30 and 32 North Concord right behind the church. We own all the houses on that half block. And the tenants, they don't like going south either.
So both of you are in favor of keeping it as a two-way?
Absolutely, yeah. It would really be an inconvenience for us, because I've kind of just set it up, that's probably where I'm going to die. And I've got a couple trailers now and things, and I like to sometimes just 3-point turn in my parking lot, go out Orange Street, sometimes go down to Mulberry Street. But whatever, I always am cognizant of people who are coming and going and things that I do. And there's plenty of, if anybody's really going to get in a problem there or get in a fight, they're looking for it. They got a bad attitude or something, because there's no reason to, have to get all out of, it's an area that, the other part of Concord Street, there's a lot built up on each side. There's not much you can do, but on my side, there's plenty of options. And it's working real well right now. And like I said, Noreen said, we own 3032, which is right on the church, right behind the church. And then we own 322, which is the house I was born in.
Okay.
So we own that, almost that whole block.
Very good. Thank you very, very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item as well, please, sir?
Good afternoon. My name's Jeremy Walk, and I live on the 300 block of West Grant Street. And I'm just going to be brief because my neighbors have summed it up pretty well. Turning Concord into a one-way will inconvenience the residents of that area significantly, limiting our ability to leave our area by directing us always down Grant onto Mulberry, which isn't always obviously the best choice. Traffic is one way, but something that wasn't in the report was that when you're at Mulberry, leaving West Grant Street, you have 3 directions of traffic to negotiate, because Mulberry is now 2-way, plus you have West Grant Street, the block east of us is 1-way headed west. So that's 3 routes of traffic. When you're at Concord to pull out onto West Orange Street, yes, West Orange is busy, but there's a traffic light half a block away. So when that's red, you always have a space. You know you can go, and your traffic's only coming from one direction. So it actually makes it a little bit safer, especially if you're headed west. Not to mention the savings in time and fuel, not having to wait at Mulberry, wait at the light at Mulberry and Orange before you get onto Orange to head west, which I do 3 or 4 times a day. So I'm obviously that 38% of the traffic that goes north on Concord. And as my neighbor, I think so eloquently mentioned, that particular block of Concord has plenty of pull-off space. The church has a curb cut for their drop-off section. So when we meet someone, we oftentimes will use that. There's also the parking lot, which is used in multiple ways to allow traffic to pass. So there is plenty of space there to pass. I've lived on that street for 11 years. I could probably count still on my fingers the number of times I've met cars coming the opposite direction on Concord as I headed to West Orange Street. And since the notices about this meeting came out, I paid particular attention. Using it on average 3 or 4 times a day, I have run into one person. I was at the intersection of Concord and West Orange. They were on West Orange to turn down Concord. They saw me. They came to a stop. That made it very easy for me to get on West Orange because now the south lane is blocked by their park. So I pulled out very quickly. They pulled in. The residents of those streets are not the issues. That's an old photo, by the way, because that chain link fence has been removed and that parking lot has been totally revamped and is open.
Yes, I can't
So-
do anything about the date.
No, I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
Yes, 2011.
So it's not really the residents that live within these blocks that would be confined by this restriction of flow that are the problem. It's more of the visitors and the pass-through people. And that's not going to stop, obviously, because West Grant being one-way east hasn't stopped people speeding west on it. There's always the scofflaws. So I would ask, I'm against converting it to one-way. I'm for keeping it the way it is. And I hope you would listen to the residents of the block, those that live there full-time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I haven't heard anyone speaking yet in favor of converting it to one-way. Is that,
Like I said, I think there was an email. I wasn't able to locate it. I think there was one email that we received from someone that wasn't able to attend. But this was the reason I wanted to provide the notification and provide the opportunity to hear from the residents as well.
so do we want to make any comment, recommendation?
Well, I'll make a recommendation to deny the conversion of Concord Street to one-way.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there any further comment?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just add that, in looking at the intersection of Concord and Orange versus Concord and King, because I think, I guess it depends on where people are going, but I just want to point out that creating the southbound only, may put even more traffic going out onto King. The intersection there is actually worse than it is on Orange. There's building setback on Orange Street from the church. There's about 15 feet, it looks like, approximately between the face of the church and the curb. So the sight lines are actually better at the Orange Street than they are at King. Again, this is a perennial problem that exists across the city, and I hope that we can develop a better solution that we can address this, across the city. I'm not sure what that is at the moment, but certainly appreciate the concerns of the residents here. So I just would be in support, I think, at this point of denying a conversion.
Okay, is there any further comment? Yes, sir.
Well, just my own personal opinion. I've used some of those mirrors at other places. I've always thought they were informally installed. I'm not sure whether the city's.
Unfortunately, they are not permitted under DOT guidelines, so the city will not install.
Okay, that's what I thought. And my an additional recommendation might be, and this doesn't quite get at what you're looking for, but we've installed stop bars at other intersections. I think my concern here has always been cars not carefully nosing out and potentially hitting someone who's walking west into that lane. So a stop bar might just be one other thing to sort of alert people to where a safe stopping distance might be. We could refresh I don't know if the crosswalk there is up to date, but it looks like it's 2 parallel lines. It could be improved as a piano crosswalk. I know it's a small stretch, but it's one other item for visibility.
Thank you. So there's a motion and a second, and there's been discussion. Is there any further discussion? So with the matter at hand, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. So ordinarily, what happens when people, I'm wanting to, Miss Davis, is that the woman who had come before? Usually people make an application or submit something ahead of time, letting us know what the agenda item is, so that if other people are interested, they are aware and can come to be able to speak about the item. I know you started talking about a situation at the intersection of Wabash and Wabank and Charles Road.
Oh, geez, that's back again. We had problems with that in the past.
We can get either Ron or myself your information afterward. We can, I don't know that it's something for here, but we can administratively handle that.
Very good. So you came to the right place, and we will be able to find a way. Very good. So there's no other items on the action agenda. The next items are the consent agenda, which we usually deal with in a relatively straightforward manner.
We'll make a motion to approve 38 through 40.
Second.
Okay, this is signs approved for installation, signs that have been removed, and condition or temporarily parking permits have been issued by LPA. There's been a motion and a second. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. The motion carries for all three. Is there any other business to be conducted here this afternoon? If not, I want to declare the September 13th Traffic Commission closed. Thank you very much. And